Okay, that should be us live. If someone in the chat could let us know if audio is working well. Before we find out we can't hear anyone. Oh, I can hear myself, so it's working. Perfect. Right, so welcome to another RideTo Riders Club live stream. Today is another bike maintenance based live stream. We're here today at Bike Smart as usual, and we will be going over the bolts checklist. We will be going over some other questions we've been asked from our members, and we will be going over just anything else that you guys pop in chat. So the entire time, just let us know if there's any questions you have, and we'll be more than happy to help. So I'll introduce Peter here. Peter's been doing us for a while now, and he's a very experienced mechanic. So if you'd like to introduce yourself to the people.
Hi, my name is Peter. I'm one of the instructors here at Bike Smart, and I run the bike maintenance courses here. So what we're going to do today is one section of the bike maintenance course.
Super. Cool, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, right, so this evening what we're going to do is the bolts checklist. It's something that we run as part of the maintenance course, and really the bolts checklist is what holds everything together, and it forms the basis of a standard service. So if you're going to do a service on your own machine, the bolts checklist is something you'll need to look through. I have given a copy of the bolts checklist to the guys at RideTo, and I believe James is going to upload it. So should you want a copy of this, it will be on the website, so you can print it off yourselves, so you can refer to it. Okay, so the bolts checklist. Bolts is an acronym. It's bolts. In fact, it's B-O-L-T-S-S-S. Okay, bolts. And each letter stands for a specific item on the bike. So the way that we use the bolts checklist is in two ways. You can use it as a quick start of day check. So if you're just about to go out for a ride, go through the bolts checklist. It takes 2 minutes at most. If you go through that bolts checklist, I guarantee your bike will be roadworthy and safe to ride. If it's not, you will know, and then you have that choice. But there's no excuse for heading off down the road for a day's ride and you've got a flat tyre, or your lights aren't working, or the horn's not working, because this bolt checklist is designed to cover all the relevant parts of your bike that you need to look at and maintain. So that way you can be sure that your bike is safe and roadworthy before heading out on the road. So that's the one way of using it, which is a quick start of day check. And then you can also use this checklist for a more in-depth look at your bike. So once a month, once every few weeks, depends on how often you actually get a chance to maintain your bike. I would suggest the best time to go through this is just after you've given your bike a good clean, because with the bike being clean, you can see everything more clearly and any faults are more likely to present themselves. So think of it as periodic maintenance. Yeah, once every few weeks, once a month. Have a good look at that bolts checklist, really drill down on your bike, and it's a good way of picking up on any potential problems. The good thing about doing that is if there are any problems, you will spot them early. 90% of the work that we do here in the workshop is preventable maintenance work. So had the owner have gone through the bolts checklist, they wouldn't be bringing their broken bike to us to be fixed, because they'd have spotted it before it broke. That then gives you or them the chance to actually spot the problem nice and early, speak to a garage or do it themselves if you want to, but it means your bike's not going to break down. You've had a chance to fix it before it breaks, and that's much better and a lot cheaper than not spotting a problem early, and then you find yourself with a broken bike with a big expensive repair bill. So bolts checklist, worth its weight. Okay, so let's get into it. So normally we do this with students, so we have a Q&A. So bolts, B, what does B stand for?
B stands for brakes.
Yeah, brakes, very good. So let's have a look at the brakes. So if this was our start of day check, we are literally just getting kitted up to go for a ride. All you do is you go up to your bike and have a look at the brakes. And I don't mean take the bike brakes apart, inspect them in minute detail. It is literally a quick start of day check. Give the front brake lever a little squeeze. Have you got a nice, firm, effective brake lever? or is it soft and spongy and does it bring itself all the way back to the handbar? If it does, do you really want to be riding your bike? You've got no brakes. Most of the time it's going to be fine, and you can see you've got a nice firm brake, but should you find that it's soft and spongy and it comes back a long way, you might want to investigate further. You might want to reconsider that ride you're going on. Same with the rear brake pedal. All you're doing is just applying the rear brake pedal and seeing that you have a firm, effective brake pedal. If it's soft and spongy, or if it goes all the way down and it's ineffective, you've got no rear brake, at least you have the choice. Are you going to ride your bike with no rear brake, or are you going to go, yeah, maybe I'd better look at it and see what the problem is? At least you know. That's the important thing. Okay, so that's your start of day check. When you're looking at it more in depth, you want to look at it more thoroughly, so let's go through that. It helps if you understand how your brakes work. So your brake pedal, brake lever, think of it as a pump. It's not a lever, it's a pump. And what it's doing is it's taking brake fluid from the reservoir through the master cylinder here, and it's pumping it through the hose down to the brakes, and you can see the hoses here. That brake fluid that's being pumped from the top to the bottom goes into the caliper, and it pushes the pistons out, and it pushes the brake pads onto the brake disc. So the brake pads squeeze onto the disc, and the more you apply the brake, the more it grips the disc, the better you're braking, and that's how it works. It's a fully adjustable, self-adjusting system, so there's not a lot for you to actually look at, but the important things to look at are, firstly, your brake fluid, and what you have, if you want to come around this side here, is a sight glass. So you've got the little glass window, and what you're looking for is, do you have brake fluid? And you have a lower limit there. So there's a line there that says lower. You do not want the brake fluid to drop below that line there. So you should have a little bubble of air there telling you what the level is, but either way, it shouldn't go below that lower limit. The reason why it shouldn't go below that lower limit is because, as I mentioned, that brake lever is a pump. So you're pumping brake fluid from that reservoir down to the calipers. If the level drops below the minimum mark, the danger is that you might draw air into the system, and now you're trying to pump air into the brake lines. It doesn't work. Going back to sort of basic physics, you can't compress fluids, but you can compress air bubbles or gas, which is why if you have a soft and spongy brake lever, chances are you've got air in the system. And all you're doing is when you apply the brake, you're just compressing the gas that's actually in your brake lines. You're not actually pushing brake fluid through the lines. That's why it's soft and spongy. So you really want to get your brakes serviced, and the way you do that is you replace the brake fluid. That should be done every major service anyway. So if you haven't had your brake fluid replaced in at least the last couple of years, you might want to think about getting your brake fluid replaced, because it doesn't last forever. It does break down, it does become less effective, and it does absorb moisture, which under heavy braking, the brake fluid gets hot to the point where it can actually boil up, and then you're going to end up with gas in your air lines, which is why you get that soft, spongy brake lever. So think about that. Once you've checked you've got sufficient fluid in the reservoir, you then want to look at the hoses. So you've got this hose here, and you can see there's a bright metal washer. That's a sealing washer. Check that there's no leaks there, which is fine. This is quite a new bike, so there's no problem there, but it might have got knocked, might have got damaged, in which case, if you're leaking brake fluid there, that could be one reason why you're losing brake fluid. Then check the hoses. Standard hoses are made of rubber. Over time, they do become brittle and they can crack. So what you're looking for is any visible signs of damage on the brake lines themselves. So if you see cracks that are deep enough to actually see the inner core, you really need to replace those brake hoses because they're likely to fail. Then you look at the banjo bolts on the opposite end. So the fluid goes through these hoses, through that bolt, into the caliper. So again, you're looking for any leak on those seals there, and that's fine. So that's all pretty good. You might ask yourself, why do you have a level on that reservoir? Does that mean that the brake fluid level is going to go down? And the answer is yes. So over time, the brake fluid level will drop in that reservoir, even if you don't have a leak. So where do you suppose that brake fluid is going?
To displace the brake pad that's being worn down.
Exactly, that's it. You've done the course.
I have.
So yeah, the brakes are self-adjusting, and what happens as your brake pads wear, the brake fluid migrates down from the reservoir to the caliper, and it fills the void behind the pistons so that the pads are always just slightly touching the brake disc where they need to be. So logically, if your brake fluid is low here and it hasn't leaked out, then it's ended up down there. And if it's ended up down there, your brake pads must be low. It follows. So that should give you a clue. If you see that your brake fluid is low, you should have a little light bulb moment and go, oh, perhaps my brake pads are a bit low. So have a look at your brake pads. And the best way to do that is get a torch, come to the front of the bike. And what you do is, I'll get a slightly more powerful torch so you can see it. Can you see? Can you see the brake pads? If you look down the line of the disc, you'll see the brake pads between the disc and the metal backing plate, and you can see a little gap.
Yep.
That gap is a wear indicator. So as long as you can see a gap there, you know that you've got a reasonable amount of brake pad left. In fact, I'll go and get a brake pad and show you on a brand new one. Okay, so what you're looking at is, this is a brand new pad. You've got the metal backing plate, you've got the friction lining, and you've got that groove in the middle. That groove doesn't go all the way to the metal backing plate. There's about a couple of millimeters between the end of the groove and the plate. The legal minimum is 1 millimeter. So if you're bringing your bike in for an MOT and it had less than 1 millimeter of friction lining, it would be an MOT fail. Personally, I think if you let it run down that low, you're asking for trouble. So when you see that that groove is getting to the end of its wear, you want to start thinking about replacing the pads. And again, it gives you advance warning. You know that they're getting close to their limit. Rather than wait until they've exceeded their limit, schedule it in. If you're going to bring your bike in for a service, tell the garage, our brake pads are getting a bit low, what's the best price for replacing them? That way you're going to get a good deal rather than you take it to the garage and they say to you, your brake pads are below the legal limit, it's now going to cost you double. So have a little haggle before you need to actually get the work in. So that's your brake pads. They're in pretty good condition, so they're fine, but again, forewarned. So if you see they're getting a bit low, you've got plenty of time to do something about it. So that's brakes. What else have we got? So, O. What do we think O stands for?
That'd be oil.
Oil, yes, oil and fluids. So I'm cheating here, so it's O and F, but it's oils and fluids. Okay, so what we need to do is have a think about what oils and fluids we have on a bike. So we're not talking about petrol because that will go down with use. It's not a maintenance item. The most obvious one is engine oil. So your start of day check is having a look at what your fluid level is. So on this particular bike, what we have is a sight glass, and that sight glass has two lines there, and it's below. Sorry, it's an upper and lower limit there. So the oil level should be between those two limits there. You can see there that there isn't any oil, and why is that? Do you think?
Is it because it's on a side stand?
Exactly. So you do not check your oil level while it's on the side stand. You check it while it's upright and on a flat level surface. So what I'm going to do, while you're looking at the sight glass, Danny, I'm going to stand the bike up, and you should see the oil level come up to its correct position. So we stand the bike up. It's now...
Yep, that is perfect.
Yeah, you can see that?
Yeah.
There we go. So a common mistake that people make is they check the oil level while it's on the side stand. And of course, it's below the minimum. So what do? They top it up, and they keep topping it up, and they keep topping it up until it gets to the right level. Well, guess what happens when you stand the bike up? You've got far too much oil in the engine, and then there's a danger of overpressurizing and causing damage. So refer to your owner's manual if you're not sure for your particular bike, but it needs to be checked while it's upright on a flat level surface. That's for a sight glass. Same applies if you have a dipstick. So some bikes have a dipstick, and what you have there is what looks like a cap like that. You unscrew it, and inside there's a dipstick. It's a rod with some marks on it, and those marks have upper and lower limits. So you take the dipstick out, give it a wipe with a clean cloth, put it back in, bring it out, and then your level should be between the upper and lower limits. And if it's low, it just needs topping up. Same as this, if it's below the low mark, that's the filler cap there. You just top it up with the right grade of oil. And again, refer to your owner's manual, make sure you know which type of oil is correct for your bike. Okay, so that's the start of day check. Usually with engine oil, you don't need to worry too much about that on the start of day check, because if it's leaking, then you're going to have a puddle of oil underneath your bike. That's pretty obvious. Come out to your bike first thing in the morning, big puddle of oil underneath it. You're going to go, perhaps I need to investigate. Other than that, bikes tend to be very good on oil. Unless they're leaking, they might be burning it, but it's going to burn it very slowly. So check your oil level, if not every day, then at least once a week, once every couple of weeks, and then you won't go for too far wrong. So that's oil. Other fluids we have are suspension fluid. And for this one, you've got your front forks, and that suspension unit has oil in the lower part here, and that's what provides the damping for your suspension. So a start of day check, you are literally just looking at the physical condition of the forks. If they're nice and clean and dry like this, you've got no problems. As the bike gets older and it wears, sooner or later your fork seals will start to deteriorate and they will start leaking. It's inevitable. It's a consumer item. It will sooner or later fail. So you just need to keep an eye on it. How long that takes before it fails depends very much on how you look after your bike and how you ride it. So if you keep the fork stanchions clean, and what I mean by the stanchion is this chrome tube. That chrome tube slides in and out of the lower part of the fork through a seal, and that seal there is what keeps the oil inside the leg. If you keep this part clean and free from any corrosion or rust, then it's going to be kinder to these seals. The seals rub up and down here, so if you've got dirt and muck and road grime on there, it's going to be more abrasive, it's going to damage the seals that much sooner. Once they start to fail, what you'll notice is a high tide mark. So you have what's called a swept area. The swept area is how much that tube slides in or out. So you have perhaps about there is the height at which the maximum travel is. What you'll see then is a black line there where the oil is beginning to escape and road dirt is sticking to it. So you just get like a high tide grimy mark there. That's called light misting. And if that was an MOT, it would be an advisory. It wouldn't be a fail because we can see that it's beginning to go, but it's not bad. As it gets worse, the suspension fluid will leak out of the seal and then start running down the fork leg. That's not so good because you're now losing your suspension fluid. And the danger is that as it gets worse, the suspension fluid is going to run down onto your brake caliper, and then onto your brake pads and onto your disc, which does happen once it leaks quite badly. The bad thing about that is that your brake pads aren't going to work very well because they're coated in oil. The good thing is they will last a lot longer, but you don't really want that, do you? So if you see the fork seals beginning to fail, do something about it sooner rather than later. If you wait until they are an MOT fail, then you're in for a much bigger bill and then potentially new pads as well because they'll be contaminated. So that's your start of day check, just a quick visual check. The more in-depth check is have a good look at the condition of the stanchions. Do they need cleaning to get rid of any grime? Just keep them clean and tidy. So that's your suspension fluid. The other fluids that we have on a bike are brake fluid, which we already discussed, so we don't need to go over that one again. And also we have coolant on bikes that are liquid cooled. So for that you need to know where the coolant is. So let's have a look on this particular bike. On this one it's nice and easy, it's right there. What you have is an expansion bottle and the way that the coolant system works. So what you have there is an upper and lower mark. You see there's an L there for lower. Not so easy to see what's in there. A little trick is get a little torch, just push it onto the tank and then give it a little shake. And you should be able to see can you see there's like a green coolant there? Can you see it?
Yep. You can see it sloshing.
Yep, it's sloshing about and it's nicely above the lower mark and it's below the high mark there. The reason why you have high and low marks is because it's an expansion tank, as the name suggests. And what happens is when your coolant is cold, it's in the engine and it's doing its job. As the engine warms up, the coolant gets hotter, it expands, so it needs somewhere to expand to. If it was a sealed system, it would build up a lot of pressure in the engine, so it needs somewhere for that pressure to be released. So you have a hose that goes from the radiator to the expansion tank, and then as the coolant gets hotter, the level rises. So if you have too much coolant in the bottle, then the danger is that it might spill out and make a mess. If the level is too low, the danger is that as the coolant cools, it's going to draw down, and the danger is you might draw air into your radiator. If that happens, you've now got air inside your radiator. It doesn't transfer heat very well. Air is a much better insulator than coolant, but also the danger is that if that air works its way around to the pump, then the pump could actually stop working because the pump needs fluid inside it to work. If it's got air in there, then it's got an air cavity, it can't do its job. So the danger there is that the engine is going to overheat and you've got all sorts of problems. So it's very important not to let that coolant level drop too low. Mm-hmm. With coolant, quick start of day check, just make sure you have got sufficient coolant. Routine maintenance is you do need to replace it because coolant doesn't last forever. Again, it's a major service item, so every major service you should replace the coolant because it breaks down and it becomes less effective. Coolant itself has three main functions. First function, as you might guess, is a coolant, so it helps keep the engine cool. And the way it does that, it circulates around the engine, getting into the core of the engine where it's hottest, and it draws that heat out into the radiator where it disperses the heat, and then it gets pumped back into the engine again. So it's regulating the temperature of the engine. The other function that people don't think about is it's an anti-corrosion agent as well. So if you were to put just water into the engine, that acts as a corrosion enhancer. It'll form an electrolytic reaction between the different metals within the engine, and you'll get corrosion inside the engine. So basically the engine's rotting from the inside out. That's why you have coolant, because it has corrosion inhibitors in it. And then the third function is that it's an antifreeze. It reduces the freezing point of the coolant, so well below freezing point. Whereas if you put water in there, when the temperature hits below zero, it's going to freeze, it will turn to ice expands, you're going to cause all sorts of damage to your engine. Coolant has a much lower freezing point, so that danger is not going to be present. But the anti-corrosion and the antifreeze components do deteriorate over time, which is why it needs to be replaced every couple of years or every major service. Okay, that's it for fluids. What else have we got? L.
Lights.
Lights, yes, lights. This is one that is most relevant for the start of day check. You come out to your bike, and I always suggest that when you come out to your bike, don't just jump on it, start the engine and zoom off down the road at 1,000,000 miles an hour, because it doesn't do the bike any good. It's always a good idea to start the bike, let it warm up for a few minutes before you head off. And the best way to do the start of day check is while the engine's running. So come out to your bike, start it, while you're putting your helmet, jacket, gloves on, you can do your start of day check. And when it comes to lights, it's dead easy. All you do is turn the ignition on, come to the front of the bike so you work methodically, have a look. is your headlight clean, not damaged and working? For those of you who've done a full license course recently, you might recognise that as one of the questions. So, is your headlight clean, not damaged? It's working, it is. You've got dip beam, main beam. Yep, you're happy with that. Then you walk to the back of the bike. Is your tail light working? Yep, there it is there, including your number plate light. And then check your brake lights. So, there's your front brake. There's your rear brake. And then check the indicators. And then if it's 4 o'clock in the morning, you really don't like your neighbours, yeah, the horn works. Yeah, guaranteed they'll just poke their head out the window and go, oh, hello, yeah, I see your horn's working. Yeah. Guaranteed to help. So that took all of about 30 seconds, and you know that before you head out on the road, your lights are working. It's a very common fault. We get people bringing their bikes in for an MOT, and either the tail light doesn't work, or brake lights don't work, or the horn doesn't work. And yeah, we have to give them the bad news that your bike's failed its MOT for something that you should have checked before you came along. But you'd be amazed how many people don't do a very simple check like that. And if you do, you know that, especially if it's dark during the winter, you know your tail light's working, nobody's going to run into the back of you. It's just common sense, really, but amazing how few people do it. So, quick start of day check those lights. When it comes to the in-depth bolts check, then what you do there is, if you want, you can do routine maintenance. And what I mean by that is things like indicators, they get very little attention until a bulb blows. And then what happens is you take the lens off, go to replace the bulb and find that the bulb has actually corroded and seized into the holder. We've had quite a few cases where we've had to throw the whole indicator assembly away because we couldn't actually get the bulb out. So routine maintenance, take the lens cover off, take the bulb out, give it a clean, put a bit of copper slip on there, which is like a copper grease, which is conductive. So it actually helps to protect the metal on the bulb, and it allows it to go in and out of the holder without any problems. If you do that, should the bulb fail, it's very easy. Just take that out and replace it with a new one. If you never do that, over a few years, that bulb could corrode to the point where we cannot get it out. So you're now in for an expensive replacement. So you can do that with these bulbs, with the tail light. More and more bikes now are going to LED lights, which you can't do that. But if you have the old-fashioned bulbs, no reason why you can't do that while you're doing your routine maintenance. So that's lights. What else? So we have T.
Transmission.
Transmission, yep. So transmission, let's come around to this side. And on this particular bike, it's chain drive. So our start of day check is we are literally just doing a visual inspection. Is that chain in good condition, and is it okay to use? So all you want to do is just check the adjustment. And you can see there that that is a little bit on the loose side. That's probably going to be due for adjustment fairly soon, but it's still absolutely fine to ride today. So by having a quick look, I now know that, note to self, next time I'm doing some maintenance, I need to adjust that chain. It's well lubed, so I don't need to do that, but if it was looking a bit dry, then I might want to actually lubricate the chain before going out for my ride. So that's the chain, and then the sprockets, just a quick visual inspection, just to make sure that they're in good condition, that there's no damaged or broken teeth. So that's all good. I mean, it's quite a new bike, this one, so you're not going to see too many problems, but signs of where you're going to see the teeth beginning to sort of hook over, get a dog tooth appearance where one side is worn more than the other, and then the gap is increasing between the teeth. So that's all in pretty good nick. And then the in-depth check, once a month, once every few weeks, is you will need to adjust the chain because you've checked it now. You know that it's going to need adjusting within the next few hundred miles. Schedule that in, so next time you do your periodic maintenance, you know that you need to adjust the chain. So that's transmission. What other T do we have?
Ooh. I've forgotten.
Ooh, T.
Tyres.
Tyres, yes, tyres. So Start of day check, you are literally just checking are your tyres fit for the day's journey. So you're having a quick visual inspection, plenty of tread on the tyres, can't see any visible damage, I can't see any screws or lumps or bumps on them. You need to do a quick pressure test. There we go, that's 36 psi. I've got a calibrated left foot, so I know exactly what the pressure is. But seriously, what you should do is, next time you check your tyre pressures and adjust them, do a little squeeze test like that. Just put your foot on the tyre and just give it a squeeze so you get a feel for just how stiff that tyre is at the correct tyre pressure. You'll know how much it squashes. So that way, if you're a bit suspicious and you think, yeah, maybe my tyres aren't where they should be, give it a little squeeze test. If it squashes more than normal, then it's a pretty good clue that it's underinflated. Very rarely is it going to be overinflated. It's usually under because you'll have lost air pressure over time. So quick visual check, just make sure your tyres front and rear are good to go. When it comes to doing a more in-depth check, that's when the tyre pressure gauge comes out. Check your tyre pressures, make sure they are correct. If they are substantially below what they should be, you want to investigate further. Where is it leaking from? It could be leaking from the bead. Get some soapy water, just put it around the bead of the tyre. The bead is the section where the tyre meets the tyre rim, so that's that bit there. Especially on older bikes, what happens is the alloy wheel corrodes, and the alloy wheel has like a plastic laminated coating on it, and as it corrodes, that laminated coating comes away from the wheel itself, and it forms a barrier between the wheel and the tyre, and then air can leak through it. So you might get sort of small bubbles of air escaping around there. If that's good, you might want to check the tyre valve itself. Make sure it's not damaged. A common problem with these is they can perish, and when they perish, you see cracks appearing in the base there. This one's quite new, so it's not a problem, but on older ones, you'll see small cracks beginning to appear on the tyre valve, especially if you use a tyre inflator at a petrol station. They're designed for cars, not for bikes. You'll notice they have a metal arm with an angled head on them. It's quite difficult to get them onto a bike tyre valve, and it's a fairly common problem that you end up stretching the valve to try and get that on, and we've had quite a few cases where people have actually ripped the valve out of the wheel trying to inflate it, so it can cause damage. So something you need to check. And if it's not that, then have a good thorough look at the tyre, get it onto a main stand or a paddock stand, and then just rotate the wheel and have a look, see if there's a nail or a screw sticking at your tyre. So that's a visual check for the condition of the tyre. The other thing you need to concern yourself about is the tyre legal? What's the legal minimum for tread?
1 millimetre.
Just 1 millimetre?
1.6?
No, it is 1 millimetre, but it's at least 3/4 of the tread area. So you can't have 1 millimetre in one bit and it's fine. It has to be at least 1 millimetre across at least 3/4 of the tread. So if we come round to the front, it's easier to check that one. 1 millimetre is not a lot, and it's quite difficult to measure. So manufacturers are very helpful, and they actually put tread wear indicators on tyres to help you see what the tread wear should be. If you look at the sidewall, what have we got on here? They've all got their own little quirks. There we are. So can you see that little triangle there? Mm-hmm. This is a Dunlop. If it was a Michelin tyre, there'd be a little Michelin man there. If it was a Metzeler, there'd be a little elephant. They've all got their own quirks. But you look at the symbol, and if you look into the tyre, there we go. Can you see that little knobbly bit there? Mm. There, perhaps, can you see it more clearly there?
Yep.
Yep. That's your tread wear indicator. That area is raised up by at least 1 millimetre from the bottom of the tread area. The idea is that as the tyre wears, that's going to wear down to meet that little knobble inside the tread area, and then you get a bridge forming across there. So you'll have a band going across there. When that happens, you know that your tyre has reached its minimum 1 millimetre of tread. And then that's the time to look at getting your tyre replaced. So rather than wait until it gets that low, when you do your visual inspection and you can see that that tread wear marker is getting pretty close to the surface, start looking around for another set of tyres. That way you can phone around and get the best price, best deal, book it in when it's convenient for you, as opposed to waiting until it's below the legal limit and then thinking, oh dear, I now need to rush off to a garage and get it done. So schedule it in, and that way you're never going to be in danger of having an illegal tyre. Okay, happy with that?
Yep.
Right, so that's T. Now it's S. What's the first S?
Steering.
Steering. Yep. So steering. This one's nice and easy. Start of day check. All you do is, as you come to your bike, just rotate the handlebars from full lock to full lock. So all you're doing is just rotating the handlebars and just checking you've got full and free movement of the steering, and that the handlebars and the levers are all in good working order. Especially relevant if you leave your bike parked on a public road, because it happens quite often. Your bike might get knocked over during the night, and whoever knocks it over just puts it back on the stand and walks away, doesn't say anything. So you're not aware of any damage. You come along, hop on your bike, ride off down the road, you find your handlebars are bent or your levers are damaged. You really don't want that. You want to find that out before you head off down the road. So turn the handlebars, lock to lock, make sure you've got full and free movement of the steering, and none of the wires or cables are pinching or stretching, and everything's in good condition. So that's your start of day check. When it comes to doing a more in-depth check, this is when you might need the help of a friend, because what you want to do is check the head bearings. And the way you do that, it's not going to be very easy to show you now, but the way you do that is put the bike on a main stand or push it on a paddock stand, and you get hold of the bottom of the forks, and with the front wheel off the ground, just pull the forks backwards and forwards. There shouldn't be any movement there. You shouldn't be able to feel any movement. If you can feel movement there, it's because the head bearings are loose and they need adjusting. It is an adjustable item. It's something that is done on a major service or done as required. Head bearings do wear out, and how long it takes for them to wear out depends on how you ride your bike. If you have a fairly aggressive riding style where you're doing heavy on the brakes, heavy on the throttle, especially if you do wheelies, you will knacker your head bearings quite quickly and they will need adjusting. If you're quite conservative on your bike, gentle braking, gentle acceleration, no wheelies, no potholes, it's almost impossible, you will find that your head bearings will last a lot longer. But that's the way you check it, and that would be how we do it on the MOT test. We'd actually just lift the front end up and then just feel for any movement on those head bearings. So that's that, and then also you would rotate the handlebars from lock to lock without any weight on the handlebars, just to feel if the head bearings are worn. So there's two things you're looking for. One, is it loose, in which case you adjust them up, you just nip them up so they're a bit tighter, or are they actually damaged, in which case as you turn the bars you'll feel that it's gritty and notchy, almost as though somebody's put some sand in your head bearings, and it just feels a bit sort of gritty and notchy. So that's that, and if you do find that the case, then you've got plenty of time to get the problem seen to before it gets to the point where it's an MOT fail. The wear process is quite slow there, so if you do that as part of your periodic checks, you'll pick up the problem long before it becomes a problem. Okay, so that's steering. Let's have another S.
Suspension.
Yep, so we talked about suspension earlier on the start of day checks where we looked at the suspension fluid. So that's what you'd be looking at for the suspension. And you have suspension on the front and rear. So you look at your front forks, make sure they're clean, not damaged, not leaking. And then also the rear suspension, which is not so obvious. And there it is there. And you're looking for the same thing. You're looking for any oil leakage. So you have oil inside that cylinder there with a seal to keep it all in. But over time it can fail, and if it starts leaking fluid, then you need to get it replaced. How about another S?
Mine's gone blank. Stand.
Stands, yes. Very neglected item, stands. Most bikes, if not all, have got side stands. And fewer and fewer bikes now have main stands. The manufacturers have gone very stingy. At one time you'd get main stands as standard, but now most manufacturers, you've got to pay for them as an extra, which is why you see fewer of them. But side stands, very basic bits of kit, but very neglected. So your start of day check, there's not really much to look at. But when you come to do your in-depth check, what you're looking at is the condition of the stand. So the stand needs to spring up under its own steam. So you can see there you've got a spring that holds it up. That's the only thing that holds it up, just the tension of that spring. Over time, the pivot, which is there, corrodes and gets dry and gets mucky to the point where it's stiff. And if you don't do anything about it, eventually it'll get so stiff that it won't retract by itself. So you stand the bike up, you kick the side stand, and it just sort of goes sort of halfway and just stays there. And that's because that pivot there has started to seize up. The way to cure that is give it a good clean, use some lithium grease. Maybe you might want to use something like WD-40 just to clean it out first, but don't just leave WD-40 because that's not a good it's not a good lubricant, it's a penetrating oil. So once you've cleaned it all up, dry it off and then just put some lithium grease in there, work it into the pivot to the point where the side stand is moving freely. The other thing you need to look out for is a lot of bikes have got a side stand switch. That's it there. Can you see that switch there? Mm-hmm. What that does is it detects when the side stand is down. And the reason why it does that is the bike does not want you to ride off with the side stand down. So if that switch is working properly, what will happen is you forget to put the side stand up, you put it into gear, try to ride off and the bike won't let you. It'll either stall or cut out, but either way, it's a safety device. What can happen with neglect is that side stand switch corrodes, seizes up or breaks, which can lead the bike to think that the side stand is up when it's not, or the side stand is down when it's not. The problem with that is that if it thinks the side stand is down, but it's not, the bike will not let you ride off. So you're going to hop on your bike, kick up the side stand, try to ride off, and the bike won't let you. So you automatically think you've either forgotten how to ride a bike or something else is wrong. And it will take you forever to figure that one out, because if you don't know the side stand switch is there, you're going to be looking at just about everything else before you arrive at that conclusion. So the way to get around that is periodic maintenance, give it a good clean up, put some lithium grease on there or copper grease, work it in so that it keeps functioning. So that's the side stand. Main stand, again, something that's hugely neglected on bikes. It's held up, again, under its own spring pressure. And if the pivots corrode, just like the side stand, eventually you'll get to the point where you try to kick it up and it won't come up all the way. So you've reduced your ground clearance. So you can find yourself with the side stand just hanging loose. In fact, we've got a bike here, so you can see what I mean. So that springs up nice and easily. And those are the pivot points there. So as they corrode up, it gets to the point where the stand won't retract, and it will just hang like that. So you find yourself going around corners and the side stand's dragging or catching, which is potentially dangerous. So you give it a good clean up and you just grease those pivot points there so that it retracts easily. Mm-hmm. Okay, that is the bolts checklist.
Perfect. See, I think we actually had someone ask today about advice for buying a new bike. Mm-hmm. I suppose a bolts checklist is a very good way if you're looking for a used bike. Absolutely. If you're looking to buy a new bike, take that bolts checklist with you, work through it. I guarantee you will pick up any faults that are on that bike. It won't help you with the engine because the bolts checklist doesn't go into the condition of the engine, but if you do the bolts checklist and then start the bike and listen to the engine, if you can hear any rattles or noises that you really think shouldn't be there, obviously exercise caution. But go through that bolts checklist, you're going to spot all the maintenance related problems
with the bike. If the bike has been well looked after, you shouldn't find any problems. If you do find any of those problems, it's a great haggling point. You can look at that and say, well, the fork seals are beginning to go. You can see the high tide mark. You can see it's misting. That's a £300 job. Or the tyres are almost on the limit. You're looking at £300 or £400 for a set of tyres, depending on the bike. Before you know it, you've knocked a pretty large chunk of money off that bike because of the maintenance you're going to have to carry out once you've bought it. What you don't want to do is buy somebody else's problem. So if they've run the bike into the ground and the brake pads are on the limit, the tyres are on the limit, forks are leaking, all you've done is just bought yourself a load of expense. So that bolts checklist will pay for itself many times over.
Yeah, perfect. I hope that answers. I think that was John's question. I'm just going to quickly check to see if there's any questions that come through. Starzy asked, what sort of time frame are we looking at between the seal starting to fail and it becoming a major problem?
It depends on the condition of the forks. So we've had forks where there's been no problem, and then there's a slight bit of weeping, and then within a week or so, it's just dumped all its oil, especially on upside down forks. What I mean by upside down forks are these ones over here. And what you have is, on the bike I showed you, the suspension fluid was in the lower half of the leg. With these upside down forks, the suspension fluid is in the upper part here. So the oil seal is there holding the suspension fluid from coming out. Well, gravity is definitely not your friend with these, because once that seal starts to go, the suspension fluid will leak out quite quickly. So it goes from light misting to quite bad quite quickly, especially if you're quite hard on your bike. Yeah, if you're fairly aggressive on the brakes, you're getting a lot of suspension travel, which is going to put more pressure on it. If you're hitting potholes or riding over curbs, that can accelerate wear. With the conventional forks like those ones, it does happen more gradually. You'll see it weeping, then it will just get worse, and it'll get worse to the point where it's really quite bad. So yeah, it can be anywhere from literally a matter of days to a matter of months.
Yeah, I suppose if you start to see signs, probably start to think about getting it sorted, really.
Yep.
And John still also asked, how often should you adjust your chain, and is the slack different for every bike?
Yep, two questions there. So I'll deal with the second part of that question first. The chain adjustment is different for different bikes. The reason for that, in fact, if I talk you through it, it'll help you to understand why. Okay, so what you have with the chain is you've got the rear sprocket with the rear spindle there, and then the front sprocket is behind there, and the spindle's back there. The swing arm has a pivot about here, so it's not in the same place as the front sprocket. If the swing arm pivot was in the same place as the front sprocket, you wouldn't need any chain slack at all. Because what happens is, as the rear wheel goes up and down through normal suspension travel, on this particular bike, the rear wheel doesn't just go up and down, it also moves backwards and forwards. So as you compress the suspension, that back wheel gets further away from the front sprocket. So if the chain was too tight, it would actually limit the amount of suspension travel that you have. The chain gets tighter as the suspension compresses. As the suspension unwinds, so for example, if you go over a bump or over a humpback bridge and that rear suspension drops, the rear wheel gets closer to the front sprocket, so the chain gets looser. So what you have to do is adjust your chain to the point where it still allows full suspension movement without either being too loose or too tight. So that would then tell you that a bike that has relatively small suspension movement has less chain slack than a bike that has a lot of suspension movement. So an adventure bike or a trailie bike that has a lot of suspension travel has to have a lot of chain slack to allow that movement. Something like a Fireblade or an R1 Very little suspension movement, it's quite stiff, so therefore they can get away with less slack on the chain. On adventure bikes, like sort of dirt bikes and so on, you might even notice they have what they call a shark's fin underneath the rear sprocket. Basically, it's a guide that prevents the chain from coming off the rear sprocket because it's so loose. So chain adjustment is very much bike specific, so you need to refer to your owner's manual to see what that adjustment should be and maintain it. So that's that. The first part of the question was how often do you need to adjust the chain? That depends on two things. One, how old the chain is, and two, how you look after it. What I mean by that is when you put a new chain and sprocket set on a bike and adjust it up properly, you may not need to adjust it for 1,000 miles, 1,500 miles. Just depends on how aggressive you are, because if you're very heavy on the throttle and the clutch, you're putting a lot of stress through that chain, you're more likely to stretch it. If you're fairly easy on your bike, the chain adjustment is less frequent because you're not stretching it. But a new chain will go 1,000 miles or so before it needs adjusting. Then it will need adjusting. Then what you'll find is the frequency becomes more often, because after that first 1,000 miles or so, you're going to get a little bit of wear in the chain. As you get wear in the chain, the links all start to wear individually. So you might have 120, 130 links in your chain. If each one of those wears by just a fraction of a millimetre, then overall it's made quite a big difference. So you start off with a chain that needs virtually no adjustment, then you do it for the first time, and then a few months later you have to adjust it again. Then it'd be a month after that you need to adjust it, and then towards the end you're adjusting it almost every week because the wear accelerates.
Perfect. Cool. I'll just double check if there's any other questions come through, but that's pretty much almost all we've got time for today. So we just have this quick one here from Michael. If you need to leave your bike outside in the winter, example, you don't have a garage, it might have to stay in for a week or two. What can you do to keep it in good condition?
Right, a couple of things. One, get a decent bike cover because you don't want it left out exposed to the elements. So a good bike cover will keep the weather off the bike. And then think about getting something like ACF 50, which is a particular brand. There are a couple of different ones on the market, but ACF 50 is a corrosion inhibitor. WD-40 does a similar job, it's just not as effective, but ACF 50 is very good. It's designed to prevent corrosion. So what you do is give your bike a good clean, thoroughly clean it, dry it off with a blower, or just make sure it's nice and dry first. Then apply ACF 50 to the whole bike except for your brake discs and your brake calipers, because you don't want to contaminate the disc and the pads with the ACF 50. But apply it to just about everything else on the bike, and that will put a protective coating on the bike that will keep water off it. It's water repellent, and also it will stop the corrosion because it stops the metals from oxidizing. And they do say that lasts for up to 6 months. So if you do that at the start of winter and leave it over winter, it shouldn't be a problem.
Perfect. That's really useful.
Yep.
Cool. Yep, everyone has indeed read and got their answers, so I think that's been very helpful.
Good.
So, yep, thanks again for everyone watching our live stream, and we'll see you in the next one. See you all. There we go, perfect.
There we are, good.